Hey everyone, welcome back. My name's Miss Marissa, and today on our weekly Wonders of Nature series, we are going to be learning how to become better scientists. So scientists are folks who are really good at observing and studying the world around them. And in order to do that, they use their 5 senses. So why don't we do a little review? What are our 5 senses? This should be pretty easy for most of us, so why don't we review together? Our 5 senses are our sense of sight, our sense of smell, our sense of taste, our sense of hearing, and our sense of touch. Oh, great job, scientists. So, we are almost ready. But in order to practice and really get super great at making those observations and studying nature and looking really closely, we are going to start off today by playing a game called I Notice, I Wonder, It Reminds Me Of. So in order to play this game, we are all going to need an item from nature. So this could be something abiotic, which means something that's not living, like a rock or even water, or this could be something that's biotic, which means something that is living or comes from something that was living at some point. So that could be anything like a seed or a twig or a leaf or even some grass clippings. There are so many different options. So why doesn't everybody take 1 minute and go find their perfect item? Pause the video if you need to. But remember, the number 1 rule when you're searching for things in nature is to leave no trace. So that means you don't want to pick anything and you want to try your best not to disturb any plants or animals when you're searching for that perfect item today. All right, everybody go grab something and I'll see you back here in a minute. All right, so once you have your perfect item, the next step is to make I notice observations. So what that means is we are going to use all 5 of our senses, actually only 4 since we're not tasting anything today, to really look closely at our item. And it's important to note that an observation is different than your opinion. So I'm not going to say something like, I think this leaf is pretty, because that's my opinion. That's how I feel about it. I might say instead that this leaf is green. So everybody should take 1 minute. I'm going to put the timer on the clock again. And you are going to use all 4 of your senses to really observe and get familiar with your item. So look really closely at it. If you have a hand lens or a magnifying glass, that will really help you look closely. You can even smell it. You can touch it, see how it feels, what kind of texture does it have. You can even listen to it. Maybe it will speak to you. Who knows? So everybody ready? Okay, 1 minute on the clock. Write down your thoughts or talk to somebody in your household. What do you notice about your item? All right, I bet everybody has some fantastic observations written down. You look like great scientists. So I'm going to share what I brainstormed and what I wrote down with you. So I noticed that my leaf is green, but I noticed that on the back, it's a little bit lighter in shade. So it's darker on the front, lighter on the underside. I noticed that it feels nice and smooth on the front, but on the back it feels a little bumpy. I noticed that it's about the size of the palm of my hand, And I noticed that it has these little serrated edges. It's not smooth on the edge. Then I also noticed that it has a bunch of holes in it. Interesting. So once you have made your I notice observations, the next step is to wonder about your item. So maybe if you have a leaf, you might wonder what tree it came from. Or if you have a rock, you might wonder what kind of rock it is. Or like my leaf has all these holes, you might wonder where they came from or why they're there. So now take 30 seconds. I'm going to put some more time on the clock and write down some things you wonder about your item. And then I'll share what I put down with you. Okay, so I wrote that I wonder what tree my leaf came from. I wonder what made all these holes in the leaf. And I wondered why it has this kind of shape. All leaves are different shapes, so why does this leaf have this kind of shape? Maybe you wrote down some similar things if you also had a leaf. Now, we're ready for the final step. The last thing that you do, once you notice some things about your item and once you wonder some things about it, the last part is to brainstorm some things that it reminds you of. So maybe your object has a certain smell that reminds you of summertime, or the shape of a leaf might remind you of a raft floating down a river. This is where you really get to be creative and use your imagination. So I'm going to put 30 seconds on the clock again. Let's see what you guys come up with. All right, did you guys use your imagination, come up with some really creative things? I wrote down that my leaf reminds me of a heart. Kind of reminds me of that shape. So now that we've had a little practice, you're going to keep practicing this as you're studying the world around you, I'm sure, because a good scientist always practices their methods. But I'm going to give you another tip and another trick for something that you can do to help you observe the world outside. And this one really involves your sense of hearing. Fantastic. So in order to complete this part, you're going to need to gather a piece of paper and a pencil. So go ahead and grab those two things, and then I'm going to talk to you about creating what's called a sound map. All right, so to create a sound map, everybody, what you're going to do is take your piece of paper and draw an X right in the center. Now you are the X. Now what you can do is take that piece of paper and head outside. You want to find a quiet place to sit, someplace nice and comfortable. And you're going to spend at least 5 minutes observing the world around you by just listening. So you're going to make a map that maps out all the sounds that you hear as you're sitting and observing. So if you are sitting here in the middle and you hear some birds over here off in the distance, you're going to add that to your map. See if you can identify where the sounds are coming from and what they are. Now, this is a really fantastic activity to do in a nature journal. So some of you might already have one. If you don't, a nature journal is a notebook where you can record all of your observations of the world around you. So you can add some dated entries to your nature journal and go outside every day and write about or draw about what you see. Or you can write one letter of the alphabet on every page. And every time you come across something that begins with the letter A or the letter C or the letter Z, you're going to add that in your nature journal. So a couple tips for keeping your nature journal are 2, 1. Make sure you use all 4 of your senses. You're not really going to taste anything, but make sure you use all the senses you can to make those observations, just like a good scientist. Rule number 2, practice making I notice observations. Those are great entries to add to your nature journal. And step number 3, make sure that you are as detailed as possible. So in your nature journal, you want to add things like drawings, text, labels, stories, color, and notes. So now that we've practiced some tips and tricks, we are really ready to put those observational skills to the test. So if you check online with the help of an adult, you will find some steps to create your very own nature journal if you don't already have one. And stay tuned next, because we're going to read a story that will give you some inspiration for creating your alphabet or A to Z nature journal. See you all soon.